Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
NFL is finally officially back. Tonight we're going to do some roster deconstructing and get you ready for the start of this new season.
Welcome back for another episode of the Dynasty Gambit. My name is Ben McCown, and I'm joined here by Austin Jacobson. Tonight, we're going to talk some roster deconstruction. And so we gathered some rosters from various members in our Discord server and asked them if we could deconstruct their rosters, give them some ideas on what we could do with their teams, and potentially either build their team for a championship now or for a dynasty in the future. So, Austin, we're pretty excited for this show tonight. It's been a little bit since we got the chance to be able to do a roster review.
Yeah, this has been something we talked about since the beginning of the show, just kind of putting some of these strategies into practice by looking at some real teams and kind of figuring out what we would do in those positions. We had a trade show the last episode, and I think this is another way that you can kind of apply some of the principles, some of the strategies that we're trying to teach here on the Dynasty Gambit and apply them to real life teams. And one of the worst things that can happen to a dynasty team is to kind of be caught in the middle. And so we're going to kind of show how you kind of get out of that middle, whether you push the chips in or set yourself up in a position where you can push the chips in season or start kind of unraveling a little bit to set up for future success. So we're going to kind of look at 3 different rosters tonight. And help them kind of go and point them in the direction they need to go and some moves they could possibly make. So we'll just analyze some rosters using Dynasty Daddy, and I'm excited to jump into that.
Absolutely. And I think we grabbed rosters at different points of the spectrum, whether it's something that's retooling. And I don't know if we have ones that are really fully in rebuild. I think all of these teams have good pieces on them. But I think there's different decisions that we're going to come up with tonight for these rosters and kind of how we go about that decision making. So, like you said, we're going to be using Dynasty Daddy to kind of break down some of these pieces of the rosters. And tonight, I want to start with a longtime member of the Dynasty Gambit. His name's Heisenberg, at least as he goes by on our sleeper drafts. And I do have to give full disclosure. I actually am in this league. Austin and I talked about that, just wanting to share that information with you guys. Not getting a leg up on Heisenberg in any way, but we're just sharing with Heisenberg in what way that we can change his roster and potentially either make it a championship winning roster or something that he's building for the future.
Yeah. So this was a super interesting roster to me when we were kind of looking at it, because I think there's a lot to like here. And I think this is a roster that can win, can compete. A couple things that stand out to me right away. Dynasty Daddy has him ranked dead last in quarterbacks. I love his running backs. Saquon Barkley, Marion Hampton, Christian McCaffrey. That's a great top 3. And obviously even the wide receivers, you got some good pieces. Justin Jefferson, obviously Jackson Smith and Jigba, Luther Burden, Jaden Reed. So some good pieces there. There's some unique scoring. Let me pull up what he sent us. I believe it's a 1.5 PPR.
Actually,
and then an extra
1.5 PPR and then full. Yeah, full tight end premium. So it's 2.5 points per reception for tight ends.
Yeah. So that's definitely kind of outside the box. And one thing I love, Dynasty Daddy is a great tool to use, but it does sort of default to normal scoring methods when it does the rank. It's just this part right here is just taking ranking straight from keep, trade, cut, or at least the values straight from keep, trade, cut, which is based off a normal format. They do have some tools like the war tool where it is based on your league format that is good to look at. But this part in particular, where it's talking about ranking teams based on position, it is going off of basic the keep, trade, cut values, which are based on half PPR basic scoring. So I do think in this format, you're going to see both wide receivers and tight ends have a higher value than normal, which I do think hurts the running backs a little bit. And considering that running back is probably his strongest position, probably not what he wants to hear. But I will say this: Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, and we're assuming a Marion Hampton based on his college pedigree, all are pass catching running backs, and so there is some value, some increased value there. I would say the guys like Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs are going to be hurt a little bit more, or Jonathan Taylor are going to be hurt a little bit more in this format because they don't catch many balls. But the guys he has are going to be, pass catchers to some degree. Obviously, McCaffrey being the biggest beneficiary of that. But the couple things we're looking at is if he wants to compete, he's probably going to figure something out at quarterback.
Yeah.
Now you could go into the season with Stroud and Tua. I think that's fine. I think if both guys stay healthy, you can win a championship with those two, considering all the other pieces he has. But there's a lot of question marks with Tua's health. And even Stroud has dealt with some little injuries here and there throughout his first 2 years, especially in his rookie season. So I would hesitate to be moving all the chips in on a team that doesn't have a clear QB1, has probably two QB2s, one of which I think in Stroud, his value is higher than his production, right? And the other one, his injury risk makes him difficult to maintain value. I mean, if he gets another concussion, his value could go to zero. He might retire. So I would just be nervous to make any huge moves, being like, I'm going all in with this team, considering your quarterback situation. What do you think about that?
My only thing with that, Austin, is to play devil's advocate here, is that if you have a strong flex, you can pretty much throw them into that super flex spot and be able to score, close to as many points as a quarterback scores if you are putting in a strong PPR running back, wide receiver, or tight end in that spot. The only issue that I have with Heisenberg's lineup is he doesn't have a lot of depth in any of the other positions besides running back. And so I think he really has to start moving around some pieces here. He's got a lot of guys on the running back position that we need to start really consolidating and start moving over to more of the higher quality point positions, like the wide receiver and tight end for this format, as well as, and I think to your point, getting a stronger part of being of his QB room. So, I think that's kind of where my thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point, because I think there is a way, it's important to know that, like, in a super flex, you don't have to play two quarterbacks. So I think that is a good point, especially with the elevated points for the tight ends and the wide receivers. I don't see a second tight end that's really that startable. Maybe Dalton Schultz is in this format. But I do agree with the principle of you could move things around and fill it in somewhere else. I will say it is a 6-point passing touchdown. So quarterbacks are still going to be your highest scoring point scorers, and you're going to want to start to if you can. But you could get away with it more here than you could in a lot of other leagues. So I agree. I think maybe the move here would be breaking up Saquon Barkley. I think that could be potentially a move that would make sense. I think you could, if you're still wanting to compete, can you get a quarterback, a tight end, and a wide receiver? I mean, obviously they're not going to be all high quality, but like 3 pieces that equal about a first in value rather than taking 2 or 3 firsts.
Yeah. The other one too, I was just looking at, with CMC, right? CMC is going to be a great player for this upcoming season when it comes to fantasy. But if he's looking at maybe having a 1-year retool, I think selling CMC during the season when he's going to have a lot of value could potentially bring a lot of value back to Heiss. And he's already got Omarion Hampton, Derrick Henry. I mean, Derrick Henry's another one. And like you said, he's not going to score as many points as Christian McCaffrey. Well, if he catches his league mates sleeping, maybe his league mates don't know that. And so he's able to sell Derrick Henry for a first and a second during the season. So, I think
he doesn't have Henry. He has
got a lot of
Barkley, Hampton, McCaffrey, though. Doesn't have
okay.
I was just saying in this format, Henry scores less, but he's not on that roster. It's Barkley, Hampton, McCaffrey, Pacheco. So, but I think you can make that point about Pacheco, right? And I think that definitely, I think the way to go here might be, unless you can get a great deal where you kind of reposition yourself.
Hey, it's Ryan Seacrest. Life comes at you fast, which is why it's important to find some time to relax. A little you time. Enter Chumba Casino. With no download required, you can jump on anytime, anywhere for the chance to redeem some serious prizes. So treat yourself with Chumba Casino and play over 100 online casino-style games, all for free. Go to ChumbaCasino.com to collect your free welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Might be go into the season, and once Christian McCaffrey puts up his first 30-point week, shop him. Put Barkley on the trading block. Put Kelsey on the trading block when he 2.5 PPR when he has a 10 catch 100-yard game and that's 35 points. Go ahead and put him on the block and try to get something and kind of maybe retool this team. And reorient it more to the scoring. And I think if you did that, where you picked up some other good young wide receivers, I think you got good bones at the wide receiver position. And then you just kind of made Hampton your anchor RB for the future and just sold all those other guys, sold Barkley, McCaffrey, Pacheco.
Yeah.
And reoriented it more towards the format. I think that could make a lot of sense. If you are wanting to go hard, if you are wanting to compete, I think you could wait. Like, I think you could go into the season with this and see how it works for a few weeks, because there's a chance that McCaffrey's a total smash. Barkley is the same as last year. Luther Burden or Jaden Reed emerges. Travis Kelce has one more really good season. I mean, you could make this work, and then you make a move where, he's got all his future picks still. So if he's a competing team and one of the quarterbacks gets hurt, maybe he can use a first to get another one. Or you make a small move. You trade Jalen Warren and Jalen Noel, and maybe you can get Sam Darnold or something like that, just to kind of feel a little bit better, or a second plus one of those kind of flex level guys. And maybe you can get a guy like Sam Darnold or Geno Smith, just so you feel a little bit better about your opportunities, your outs here. Because if you're trying to compete, I do think I take your point, and I think it is, it's a good point. That you can play some other positions there. But if you're trying to win a championship, I do think it's going to be very hard to win in the playoffs all the way through with really only one quarterback. And I think that having two, you're at a high risk, no backups. You're at a high risk of having, nobody, right? And so I would also say, I think guys like Gabe Davis, even Montreal Johnson, assuming he's not on taxi, I'd have to look at that, but Gabe Davis, even Brandon Cooks, I think you can cut and pick up. I was looking at the waiver wire here. There's Gardner Minshew, Tyson Bagent, some of those guys. I would maybe grab a couple backup quarterbacks just to have at the end of the roster. I think that there's a lot of risk in this, leaving the roster as it is and trying to compete. And I think that if you're wanting to compete, you're going to at least want to add a couple more bodies to the quarterback room, even if they're backups or even if they're fringe starters, Tyler Shuck, somebody like that. Just add that, try to get them into this quarterback room, just so you feel a little bit better about your chances, and then maybe trying to turn one of those running backs into a wide receiver or tight end so that it kind of fits this format a bit more.
Yeah. I want to pose this question to you, Austin, because I just kind of thought about this as I'm looking at this roster. But let's say you don't believe in the future of Tua, right? And let's say Heiss sees himself. He's basically now 9 weeks into the season, and he is 2-7, right? And at this point, he might want to start making a push for a higher draft pick seeing if he might be out of contention. And what are your thoughts on potentially selling Tua at a point where, another team might need him, knowing that this is also kind of a quarterback heavier draft class coming up? Where do you kind of see that with a team that's looking to rebuild and kind of start to clean the slate a little bit out of some of these players that are kind of older, have some injury risk, but, you kind of want to make a change?
I think I would be very tempted, even right now, if this was my roster, to start selling right now. I think that this team, on paper, like Dynasty Daddy ranks it as the second best starting lineup. Do you think that he is the one or two injuries away from having guys that he can't sell? Barkley, McCaffrey, maybe less so Barkley. Maybe there's a little bit more mercy on Barkley because he was so good last year. But McCaffrey and Tua are one injury away from being worthless in Dynasty. And so there is something to be said for, selling those guys very soon, trying to get off of McCaffrey, trying to get off of Tua, taking a 1-year punt, getting off of Travis Kelce. This format, Travis Kelce's is going to be available. I definitely think you could get a first for Travis Kelce in this format if people are paying attention. I'm a contender. I would be willing to send a first for Travis Kelce when you're talking about reception for tight end.
Yeah, it's pretty tasty.
Retool. You could have a very young roster. Stroud, I'm fine with that being. Yeah, Stroud staying in there as a QB that you draft some rookies next year around. Then you have Hampton. I like Hampton. You got some younger running backs down the line there, but Hampton kind of being the anchor of that team. And then Jefferson, JSN, Luther Burden, Jaden Ruby, Jalen Noel. Jalen Noel. Those guys are all great for a window of a 1-year reboot, and you don't have to worry about that too much. And I think if you traded Tua, Bart, McCaffrey, and Kelce, you could get a very nice haul. I think that between those guys, you could conceivably get 6 firsts worth of value. And you take that, you have a team structured around Stroud, Hampton, Jefferson, JSN, and 7 firsts, including your own. I think you could build a very exciting team in a year, which is very hard to do that when you're looking at this team on paper and you're like, man, I want to compete, and we're about to start the season, and the power rankings show me as the second best team. So I understand if you wanted to start off the season and just see kind of how things were going, but I think that he's in a pretty good spot where, barring some significant injuries, he could pivot pretty easily and turn this into a full 1-year punt and be in a great position to immediately compete with a young team next year.
Yeah. I think that's the real difference when you're looking at a roster like this versus a true rebuilder, in that he does have a lot of pieces and there's a lot of value to go around. When you talk about, picks being so liquid, he can move players like Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, eventually at some point in season Tua, and really get a lot of that capital back and be able to really invest in the next draft or future drafts.
Yeah.
So
yeah, a lot of times you see teams with a lot of these older players, like this team, Barkley, McCaffrey, Kelce, and they've spent a lot of their future capital to get it. He's still got all of his future capital, so I think he can be in a great position to kind of pivot and go either way, depending on how the season starts.
Oh, I agree, Austin, for sure. I think that's kind of the consensus between us, is that this is a 1-year rebuild or 1-year punt, probably. I don't feel confident that it's going to compete, but I also don't think it's a full rebuild for sure. So definitely Heiss, get out there, start putting some of those guys. So for the second roster that we have here, we have kind of one that's a little bit more in the middle for us, that I kind of was looking at. In my mind, I think this was one that's not a 1-year. Well, I think it's kind of a 1-year punt, or it's potentially contending. It's kind of a little bit more in the middle. It's a little bit more shady, but I think there's some things that I was looking at. Austin, what were your thoughts with and this is Amish Bro in the Discord server. So, what were your thoughts on the roster when you were looking at it?
Yeah, to me, this is a super interesting one. I actually like this quarterback room better than the one we were looking at with the last roster, just because even though It's probably similar in value, right? Purdy and Prescott is probably pretty similar quarterback room to Stroud and Tua. You have Joe Flacco, who's a guy that potentially is another starter, third starter. That's the type of guy that I think. I mean, assuming he starts with the Browns, is the type of guy I was saying that Heisenberg could acquire. And I think you just have two guys that are probably more likely to score points. Purdy's similar to Stroud, but I think Dak Prescott is a guy that when he stayed healthy, he's been a top 10 quarterback, and I feel much more comfortable with him as a QB2 and much more comfortable with him holding value. So I actually don't have much of a problem with this QB room as long as you've got strong other positions. His wide receivers are awesome. I loved having Jamar Chase, Nico Collins, AJ Brown, Jalen Waddle. Also, really like the way he's constructed this roster. When you have four just absolute studs like that, there's no point in having 12 wide receivers on your roster. Just have those guys and a couple others. Load up on some backup running backs and backup quarterbacks. It does look like it's a little bit of a shallower league, not as many roster spots. I think you could probably cut Jacob Cowing, but I'm fine with it. I still think overall that like the wide receivers are going to carry this team, put you in a great position to compete, and none of them are old. AJ Brown is 27, almost 28. Is that right, or is he 28 now?
I think he turns 28 or it's 28. Yeah.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Yeah, he's still several years away from 30, and so I wouldn't worry about age there. I think your running back room is, I mean, it's not super exciting, but it'll get the job done. I mean, I think that Brian Robinson and Aaron Jones should be guys that get you 12 points a week, 10 to 12 points a week pretty routinely, and then Caleb Johnson, hopefully becomes the guy in Pittsburgh and becomes your running back one. So I think that's perfectly fine. The running backs are perfectly fine. The quarterbacks are perfectly fine. Wide receivers are going to carry you. So I honestly don't think you need to do too much tweaking. The tight end room is the one where I'd have a little bit of concern. I think Zach Ertz is a guy that can start the season for you and be fine. Tight end is probably a 1-year bet. And so you're kind of banking on Harold Fannin becoming something. And so maybe that's the spot you try to improve. You have all your future picks. So maybe you can, leverage, maybe throw a second out there and try to improve the tight end. Maybe add to Fannin plus a second. Can you get a guy like, I don't know, can you do Fannin and a second and get Colston Loveland? Maybe. I don't know. And then that kind of gives you a little bit of a mitigate that risk somewhat. I mean, Loveland I know was going in the second of some draft, so maybe somebody that liked Fannin could do that. Maybe that's a little ambitious, but something in that range.
When I'm looking at this running back room, this is kind of the disclaimer I have to go with Dynasty Daddy and other draft roster analyzer and trade analyzer tools that we use. And that is that, when I look at this roster, I think the best position that he has within that Amish Bro has within his roster is the wide receivers, like you had said. But it's because of the depth that it doesn't rank as high as his other members of the league. As you can see, is just with his running backs, he has a lot of, tier 3, 4, he's got good running backs, but he doesn't have a smash running back that I want to slot into my RB1 from the start of the season, right? Something like a Breece Hall, something like a Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley. But Caleb Johnson will be good, but it's just because he's built so much depth at the running back position that it ranks it number 1 in the league. So you always have to look in the context of your team and not the way that it grades, because, I also don't think his QB rank is last in the league either, but it's just because, again, he doesn't really have a lot of depth behind Brock Purdy and Dak Prescott. I mean, he's got Joe Flacco, but yeah, it's going to be a little misleading. I I think I agree with the piece of the wide receiver part where, it's Jamar Chase, Nico Collins, AJ Brown, Jalen Waddle is your wide receiver 4 going into the season. That's great. And I think you bring up a good roster construction point, Austin, that you don't want to just load up on a bunch of dart throw wide receivers because it just feels at that point like being a roster clogger. I think there's a lot to be said about rostering handcuffs when it comes to running backs and also backup quarterbacks as well. And that's kind of the way that you build a lot of rosters, and it's a good way to build because you're essentially prepared when anything happens in the season. I'm somebody who's hopeful. I love to collect the wide receivers in case somebody breaks out, but you're taking a lot of risk in that. So I think from that perspective, I think Amish Bro's done a good job of kind of divvying up the roster spots and making sure that his wide receivers are really hitting at the top 4 position. But as far as the running backs go, I'd like to see something more there. And then also when it comes to the tight end position, Harold Fannin, Theo Johnson, and Zach Ertz aren't really the tight end room that I want to enter into the season with either, just that by itself if I'm going to be trying to compete. So this roster, to me, it says contender, but that's just because of it being so heavily weighted with the running backs. I think it's, to me, again, another 1-year punt.
Yeah, I actually think that I see the idea of this being a team that you could tear down, but I think that you can go into the season trying to compete with this team just because I think wide receiver is exactly where you want it to be. I think there's a pretty good chance that Purdy and Dak get you competitive points at quarterback, and I think that you can patch together that running back room fine to be competitive. I do think that you probably want to make a move to improve the tight end position. Maybe Zach Ertz can carry you a little bit. I don't think you have to make a decision right away because overall your roster is pretty young. I don't think there's like guys that you're like, if I don't to try to win. And actually think if this was my team, I might make a small move for a tight end. I actually like the running back room as it is, and we might slightly disagree on that, but I think this is the type of, if I can, a wide receiver room for this, a running back room, it's just kind of okay. I'm taking that all day in Dynasty. I agree with you totally. Great point on the way a lot of these team analyzers do things is it's much max and they're counting them as, the total value, right? The total value of all those guys. Whereas his wide receivers, he has less of them. And so it's not counting them as highly. But I think this is really what's more important. And he's got 4 smash starters. A lot of in a position to compete. And if you start the season 3-5 or something like that, I think you have plenty of assets you can pivot off of. I just don't think you need to necessarily go into the rebuild mode now. Whereas I think there is more risk with Heis's team with having guys like McCaffrey and Saquon that hold so much the value of your team that are older, where you want to try to trade them at the peak, and if something happens, their value could decline very quickly. Chase, Nico, AJ Brown are guys that still have value even if they got a bad injury early in the season. So I think that this team's in a little bit better position to wait and see before tearing down. That's just my thought.
Yeah. I want to touch back on the running back piece of it because you are pointing out a dynasty flaw in myself, and that is because I want a strong running back. But you don't need one, right? Like Aaron Jones is going to be starting the season for the Vikings, and he could very well hold that job throughout the season. And then same thing for Caleb Johnson and Brian Robinson. We have no idea how that's going to work out. But the difference between this roster and Heis's roster is that the wide receivers are much stronger. He's basically has all of his wide receiver and his flex spots filled for the whole season based off of Jamar Chase, Nico Collins, AJB, and Jalen Waddle. So I feel a lot more confident about this team. But I think it's still got some flaws or some holes.
I think you pointed out perfectly that when your team is depending on running backs to be a competitor, you have just way less outs. There's just way less margin for error. When your team is depending on wide receiver, there's a level of you can go hard for the championship, but even if something happens, you're still fine for next year. Whereas the running backs are just such a smaller window that once you've bought running backs, you're in this 1 to 2 year window of like, let's make sure that these guys smash. Let's make sure that I can win a championship now because they may not be starting or they may be retired in a couple of years. So that's why I feel so much more comfortable on a team with a lot of receivers, especially young receivers. Um, and I think that there's just way less of a time crunch to make a decision quickly on
Yeah.
which way you're going to go. You can kind of wait and see.
I think the other piece of that too is like running backs are much easier to buy in season than wide receivers
Yeah.
are because people realize the value of wide receivers are so insulated and that they are a position that you want to hold on to. So running backs are much easier to buy and much cheaper to buy throughout the in season, off season, really whenever. But yeah, so I mean, you really want to try and build heavy at wide receiver when you can when you're in startups. At least that's kind of the way that I like to build mine. I mean, you can really go about it any way you want, but a lot of for me is quarterback in a super flex league with wide receivers and starting to hammer some of those running backs later if I can. If I, even if I can also try and get a smash running back like a Breece Hall or Jonathan Taylor somewhere in the round 4 or so. So we have one last roster here, Austin, and this one kind of goes a little bit. Let me just see if it's going to pull up for me. Here we go. This is from one of our friends in content creation, but Rocco from Fourth and Fantasy, and he had submitted this to us, and I really, really like this where this roster is going. For me, I think. Oh, hang on a second. That is Amish Bro. So let me change that here. 1 second. I'll be able to cut that. It's really hard to see when I'm trying to share it. Okay, here it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So here is Rocco's roster right here. And I really like what he's got going here, especially at the quarterback position. Yeah. He's got Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, Kyler Murray, Matthew Stafford. And I mean, even for his quarterback 5, he's got Tyler Shuck. And then on the off chance that Shedeur Sanders gets a starting job, he's there as well. So, he's got great wide receivers as well. The only issue I see, of course, with competing at the start of the season is Rashee Rice getting a suspension. So, I think there's definitely a little bit of a hole there, but with Drake London as your wide receiver 1, that's a pretty good cornerstone to have there. It's wide receivers. He's got another great cornerstone in Breece Hall. And he's got a lot of good serviceable running backs between Cam Skattebo, Tyrod Tracy, potential bit for Bashal Tutin to show up in season. And some other pieces there as well. And then, of course, at tight end, he's got Evan Engram, Terrence Ferguson, Harold Fannin, Johnny Smith. So a lot of, serviceable tight ends. And I think Evan Engram is going to have another solid season. But across the board, I think he's built it out well. It's on the verge of really, really being a top team in the league. There's definitely some areas where I have a little bit of concern, mostly at the running back 2 position, as well as, kind of his, and really more so the wide receivers, right? When we were talking about like constructing your roster and really getting some of those pieces that are going to be stronger in the wide receiver position, Drake London and Rashee Rice, great. But like I said, Rashee's potentially going to get suspended for, 4, 6, 8 games. And then you're talking a bunch of these other guys like Calvin Ridley, Jacoby Myers, who are all serviceable and can definitely be a vet to be able to win on a contender. I just don't think, you're taking a lot of the depth out of there to be able to have a team when Rashee Rice does come back.
Yeah, I think the team is very, very good. I mean, I really like this team. I don't think it's ready to win a championship this year, though. And I think sometimes it looks like, based on all of the rookies on this roster, that he did a 1-year punt last year and stacked up his roster with value. And I think that the temptation with that can be, look at all this value on my roster. I'm ready to go win it right now. And you can kind of mess it up a little bit by doing that. I think that he has an extra 26 first, an extra third, an extra fourth, just a bunch of extra picks. He's got a bunch of rookies and guys that have potential to gain in value. I think this is where you kind of like pump the brakes a little bit. Don't start selling assets. You built the foundations of what could be an absolute dynasty team. I would probably go into the season and say, okay, I am planning on this taking another year. If something changes early in the season, and let's say Cam Scatteroo suddenly is like taking the world by storm, he's like Bucky Irving last year, and is your solid, RB2. Let's say Rashee Rice only gets a 3-game suspension in week 4. And you're 2-1 through those 3 weeks. In week 4, he comes back and picks up where he left off last year. Jacoby Myers and Calvin Ridley are, they're studs. Like, they're older guys, but they're producing 14 points a game, and you love them as your 2 flexes. Then I think it's fine to kind of play it out. I wouldn't necessarily make any huge swings to like try to go for it, but play it out, see if you can be a playoff team and still be in a great position for next year. The other way you could do this is, one of the most interesting parts of the roster is that quarterback room, because you've got 4 starting quarterbacks minimum, up to 6, depending on how Shuck and Sanders work out. I think you have a great opportunity to sell Kyler Murray, to sell Matthew Stafford, to sell Jacoby Myers and Calvin Ridley early in the season. Like, if they're producing, get a bunch more picks and young players. And then 2026, your team is absolutely loaded.
Yeah, definitely. I really like it. I like the future for it. 2026 could be a real smash year, especially with those 2 first rounders and potentially adding more to that, like you're saying, making some deals in season. Because, I think there's definitely a lot of like foundational pieces that we love in this roster. So definitely a dynasty for the future, Rocco. That'll do it for us for the roster reviews for tonight. We've got a lot of fun things coming up in August. Obviously, the season is fast approaching, and we're very excited. But we got a mock startup that we're already doing right now for you guys, and we're going to be coming up with the review next week. And then we've got some other things down the pipeline, including working with our friends at the Debbie Dojo within the same network. Yes. So we're excited for a lot of that. And we've got some other things in season that we're working on. So, definitely get connected with us. Follow us on YouTube. We're here on the FSA on Grindhouse. You can find us on TikTok. You can find us on our Twitter, Discord. Definitely reach out to us, DM us. We want to thank also FSAN Network just for hosting us and being able to give us this platform to be able to share our thoughts and be able to be the content creators that we can really be. So, Austin, any other parting thoughts, man?
No, I think this is fun. I think this is something we'll probably try to do again. Appreciate everybody listening, and looking forward to the next one where we recapped our mock draft, and special shout out thanks to everyone who participated in that mock draft. This should be a fun topic to talk about.
Absolutely. You guys have a good night.